And like Rumi, Ghazali, in the pre-modern world, these people were really polymaths. They studied all the disciplines and sciences of the religion. And so Imam Ghazali was one such individual, and he was a complete genius. He was actually an orphan who rose through the ranks purely because of the intelligence and the power of his mind. And he mastered all of the sciences and knowledges of his day. And in his early 30s already, he was a world-renowned scholar at the Nizamiya College, which is a famous college like the Harvard or Princeton of the day. And he was this like chief lecturer, and he had hundreds of turbaned scholars sitting at his feet. And he loved to debate people because he was this master intellect with this quick wit, and he could debate any subject. And he said of himself that any subject he studied, he would completely master it. So he had this gift. But he said in his autobiography, which is worth reading, The Deliverance from Error is what it's called, Munqidh min ad-Dalal, if anyone's interested, that he came to a point where he started to feel hypocritical because he was reading all this knowledge, and he had studied all these traditions, including all this like Greek philosophy and all these different schools of thought. And he had mastered it all, and he could tell you about it all and teach about it and write about it. But it came to the point where he was like, I'm not really sure what's true anymore, what's real. In other words, I don't have certainty. How do I know this group is right or that group is right or this way is right or this sect is right or that? I have to trust somebody, but I want to know for sure for myself. I want certainty. And so he became in this place of doubt, and he was in a strange place because you think of a common person having these type of doubts, that's one thing. But right, this big scholar, Shaykh al-Islam, teaching everyone about the religion, having these doubts, that's a different story. And so he said he started to oscillate. He started to read the books of the Sufis, first of all, and he said he mastered their theory, their doctrine. But what he found frustrating about the Sufis and what differentiated them from others is that knowing the theory didn't really matter. It's not the point. The point is putting it to practice and attaining dhawq, tasting the reality. And he said the theory came very easy for him. Right? He was like a stereotypical academic, intellectual. But the practice came harder to him. And he found that he was distracted by his job and his career and all these things that he had to do. And actually that being in front of people and teaching and everyone lauding him and celebrating him and being invited to the palace and dining with kings, when the whole Sufi path is about getting rid of the ego self and letting go of the self and turning away from the world. And so he was like really torn. And he said, I kept oscillating between this, and I felt I have to leave my position and go into the wilderness and just invoke the divine, right? But then he said he would have this voice. It's like, no, you came from nothing, and look where you are, and you're doing good things. You're teaching people, and it's a good job, and you shouldn't leave that, and you have dependents, and et cetera, et cetera. And so he said, I oscillated between those for 6 months until finally Allah decided the matter for me. He said he got up on the mimbar to speak and to teach, and he tried to speak one day, and words wouldn't come out of his mouth. He couldn't speak, literally, physically could not speak. And then he fell ill. And all the doctors came and said, what's wrong with him? And they couldn't find anything wrong with him. And they said to him, whatever is wrong with you is not physical, it's spiritual. Probably the modern doctors wouldn't say things like that, but in the pre-modern world, those doctors also trained in the spiritual arts and understood when something was physical and when something was spiritual. And so Imam Ghazali knew this was the divine order, in a certain sense, to leave. And so he ended up leaving, and he would leave for a full decade, actually 10.5 years. And he would essentially renounce the world and be in seclusion. He traveled, he made pilgrimage, he was in Jerusalem, he was in Damascus, and he devoted himself to invocation, to spiritual purification, to the method that we're going to explore in this course. And then he wrote his magnum opus, The Revival of the Disciplines of the Way, Ihya Ulum ad-Din, which is essentially articulating the way. Now, as it relates to what we're talking about today, this is very interesting in this magnum opus because he basically argues that the Prophet ﷺ taught a way to his companions, a way of being, a way of transforming the heart, a way of drawing near to the divine presence, a way of spiritual illumination. But that over time, right, and he lived some, 5 or 6 centuries after the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, that people had lost by and large that spiritual method, and the scholars, the ulama, had been focused on the outer dimensions, the do's and the don'ts and the rules and the this and this, and then it had become a career, because to be a great scholar was like becoming a lawyer or a judge, right? It had prestige in the society, and so people were focusing on that and neglecting the inner spiritual aspect of the prophetic way, which is not simply an aspect, but the essence. And his Ghazali is getting at that all this learning how to pray and how to fast and the fiqh of this and the logic and studying all of these disciplines, they're tool disciplines to prepare us for the spiritual path. All these outer sciences are like the provisions that one should study to ascend the divine path up the mountain to the divine presence. But don't think that studying about the provisions is walking the path. That's his point.